Hey guys, tonight we step into the dim, dusty chaos of Leonardo da Vinci's Renaissance workshop, where brilliance meets burnout and sleep is strictly optional. You can almost feel the brush hairs stiff with dried egg yolk, smell the hot wax curling from a failed experiment, and hear the sharp scratch of metal nibs carving ideas into parchment at 2 in the morning. This isn't the serene, candlelit artist studio you've seen in paintings. This is organized madness. And you? You've just become Leonardo's newest assistant. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing where our sleepy little history circle reaches. Don't just listen. Feel this story. It was kept alive for someone. Maybe that someone is you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just after dawn, dragging your feet past the outer gates of the Sforza Castle in Milan. The stone is cold beneath your sandals. Your tunic itches, and your mouth tastes faintly of vinegar. Yesterday's lunch was a mystery stew, and whatever bread you could salvage from the charcoal-burned crusts. You're barely inside before a scrawny boy with ink-smudged fingers barks your name and tells you to hurry up. You trail him through a winding corridor, down 2 uneven steps, and suddenly, you're there, Da Vinci's workshop. It's not what you expected. The room is alive, bursting at the seams. There are long tables cluttered with brushes, pigments, vials of something that looks suspiciously like goat's blood. Huge parchment scrolls are nailed to the walls. Metal armatures hang from the rafters like puppets mid-dance. One of them moves slightly. You choose not to investigate. And there, in the center of it all, is the man himself, Leonardo da Vinci. He doesn't look up from his sketch, just waves his left hand vaguely in your direction, while his right keeps moving with urgent precision. He's ambidextrous, of course, because of course he is. Put the new one to work, he mutters, as if you're a clay pot being thrown onto a wheel. You're immediately handed a mortar and pestle. Start grinding, ochre to dust, not too fine, not too coarse. Think powdered bread crust. You grind. For the next hour, you grind. One of the other apprentices sidles up next to you and whispers, "If you mix it too fast, the bowl might crack. Happened to Lorenzo last week. Leonardo made him clean pigeon droppings off the roof tiles for 2 days." Welcome to the team. You're surrounded by boys and young men like you. Some barely older than children. Others with ink already embedded in their knuckles. No one speaks above a murmur. Even laughter is cautious. You quickly learn why. Leonardo's ears, like his intellect, are unnaturally sharp. He has a habit of snapping his fingers and announcing whatever private joke you thought you whispered. The walls hold secrets, literally. Hidden cupboards disguise failed machines and dangerous tools. There's a rumor that one of the cupboards still contains a preserved bat, suspended in amber. No one's dared to open it since 1495. The light in here is wrong. It filters through tiny windows high on the walls, casting strange shadows on everything below. The glow of candles adds to the blur, flickering against brass and canvas. You squint, eyes adjusting as you work, then realize this disorientation is probably intentional. Leonardo loves tests, loves watching how people adapt under pressure. He walks past you once and murmurs, "Why does no one see the beauty of dust in motion?" You blink. He's gone again, By mid-morning, your shoulders ache. Your fingers are stained rust red and lapis blue from grinding pigment and testing brushes. One of your nails is slightly purple. You don't remember hitting it. You're hungry. You're not eating yet. Instead, you're told to follow the master into his private room, an unventilated space filled with anatomical sketches, dissected frog skeletons, and what looks like a horse's hoof halfway molded into bronze. He gestures to a table. Sit. You sit. He leans over, draws something in front of you. A face, perhaps. A mechanical gear system. Or maybe it's a beetle. Honestly, it could be all three. What do you see? He asks. You stammer something about shadows and wheels. He frowns. Wrong. You see a lie told by light and proportion. See again. This is your first lesson in what scholars now call Leonardo's optical philosophy. He didn't believe in just observing. He wanted you to unsee the world and reconstruct it with math, geometry, and raw imagination. Some historians argue whether Leonardo's teachings were genius or just pure chaos disguised as brilliance. Even today, no one's entirely sure how his brain worked, or if it ever rested. You're released just before noon to clean the brushes, dozens of them, some stiff with glue, others slippery with oil. You're warned, if a single sable hair bristle is bent out of shape, it ruins the line work. The line work ruins the painting. The painting ruins your life. You get very good at being gentle. By the time the bell in the courtyard tolls for midday, you feel like you've lived a week. You haven't painted a single stroke. You haven't touched a canvas. You haven't even been told where the toilets are, though a hunch tells you not to expect anything more advanced than a stone hole and a communal bucket. As you finally sit down to eat a handful of olives and hard cheese, you realize something chilling. There are no chairs in this workshop, no benches, no stools. No one sits unless Leonardo tells them to, and he hasn't told you to. Sleep? You won't get any. Not the kind that matters anyway. Leonardo da Vinci, despite his charm and wide smile in portraits, is perhaps the most sleep-deprived genius in history. And now, by sheer misfortune, so are you. He follows something called the polyphasic sleep schedule, which means instead of a cozy 8 hours under a wool blanket, he naps for 20 minutes every 4 hours. Yes, you heard right. 20 minutes every 4 hours. You try this once, maybe twice, and immediately regret every life choice that brought you here. Your eyes burn like they've been rinsed with lime water. Your limbs feel like meat left too long in the brine barrel. And just as your brain starts drifting off into the sweet embrace of real rest, someone shakes your shoulder. Time to wake. Leonardo wants help sketching cloud shadows on parchment. There is no mercy. This sleep schedule is allegedly how Leonardo gained time to invent helicopters, design siege weapons, write cookbooks, and casually paint the Last Supper. Some modern biographers suggest it was all a myth, or exaggerated by followers eager to paint him as superhuman. Historians still argue whether he truly stuck to this regimen, or simply liked the chaos it created among his apprentices. But you? You're stuck in the very real consequences of this bizarre lifestyle. Your skin is starting to look translucent. You accidentally dip a brush into your cup of drinking water instead of the rinse bowl. You no longer fear death. You welcome it if it means 5 uninterrupted hours of unconsciousness. During one midnight sketch session, you find yourself nodding off while holding a lamp. You jolt awake to Leonardo watching you with those hawk-like eyes. He doesn't scold you. He just says, "Sleep is for those who have already seen everything." What does that even mean? You don't know. You just blink and try not to cry. You begin noticing that some of the older apprentices, those who have been here for years, don't blink much anymore. Their hands twitch, even at rest. One mutters color theory terms in his sleep, or maybe it's Latin. Another has developed a nervous tic, where he whispers measurements out loud. 4 cubits, radius, tilt 23 degrees. But no one quits. Not really. Leaving the workshop means leaving Da Vinci. And that's like abandoning history while it's being written. And there's something intoxicating about that. Even through your exhaustion, you catch moments of pure magic. A diagram of a flying machine so beautiful it makes you forget your hunger. A whisper of how light moves through oil, captured in a brushstroke so delicate it trembles with life. But you can't keep up. After 3 days, you hallucinate a small talking cat who critiques your posture. On day 5, you walk into a support beam so hard you give yourself a nosebleed, and then try to sketch the blood pattern because Leonardo might find it mathematically interesting. During your 6th sleep break, you dream of sleeping. That's it. Just sleep. A wooden bed. A wool blanket. Silence. It's the most erotic thing you've ever experienced. You start making deals with yourself. If I can just lie down for 10 minutes without someone ringing a bell, I'll eat only boiled cabbage for a week. If I survive until Sunday, I'll never complain about anything again. Not even Salai's onion breath. And yet, somehow, this sleep-deprived state becomes your new normal. Your body adjusts. Your brain doesn't exactly, but it begins to float in a permanent haze. The world becomes softer at the edges. Light seems warmer. Sounds become a kind of music. You catch Leonardo looking at a sleeping bird and whispering to himself, "How does it dream of flight without knowing falling?" Was that a profound thought? Or just a man on no sleep talking to a bird? You can't tell anymore. One of the more seasoned assistants, Tommaso, gives you a tip. Try to nap during lectures, he mutters as Leonardo begins a speech on the geometry of noses. If he's talking about ratios, you've got 5 safe minutes. And you do. You master the art of sleeping with one ear open, literally. You wedge your head between 2 dusty sketchbooks and hum softly to mimic thinking. Leonardo walks past once, glances at you, and nods approvingly. Deep in thought? Good. You start calling this position the thinker's slouch. Still, the side effects build up. Your stomach grumbles constantly. Your hands tremble if you hold a stylus too long. Sometimes you forget where you are, momentarily believing yourself back home in your village, or asleep in a boat drifting down a Venetian canal. It's Salai who catches you one night about to drink turpentine, thinking it was wine. He laughs so hard he nearly drops the lantern. "Not dead yet, huh?" he teases, before walking off with your actual wine and half your bread. You hate Salai, but you're too tired to care. Then there's Leonardo's workshop alarm system, a contraption involving a wire pulley, 3 brass balls, and a sleeping cat that meows when cold air hits it. You don't know how it works. You only know that it rings exactly when you finally drift off. You're convinced Leonardo built it just to test your sanity. Historians still debate whether the master used his assistants as literal experiments, pushing sleep deprivation, emotional fatigue, and artistic limits to see what strange new insights would bubble up. Some say it was cruel. Some say it was brilliant. You don't know. You just want a nap. A real one. But instead, you're being pulled into another room, handed a candle stub, and told to hold it steady while Leonardo maps the shadows on a bronze sculpture's cheek. You blink once, blink twice, then you forget you were ever tired at all. The bronze cheek seems to glow. Leonardo hums to himself, pencil dancing. You feel for just a second, like maybe, just maybe, you've been lucky to end up here. Then the cat meows again. The workshop smells like hot vinegar and rotting parchment when you're finally trusted with your first real task of the day, preparing the pig bladders. You didn't mishear that. Pig bladders. Boiled, stretched, scraped, and dried until they're translucent enough to be glued over a wooden frame, then used as makeshift canvas or protective membrane for Leonardo's latest optical invention. It's all terribly clever and horrifying. You're handed a sloshing bucket of the things and told, try not to puncture them this time. You didn't even know you punctured them last time. You squat near the hearth, where a blackened pot waits over low flames. The smell is eye-watering, like a butcher's stall left in the sun. You're elbow deep in this mess before you fully comprehend that your job this morning is part chemist, part janitor, part medieval balloon animal technician. Boiling them is the easy part. Once soft enough, the bladders must be scraped clean with a dull blade, treated with a vinegar and ash mixture, then stretched out over a wooden hoop like a miniature drumhead. It takes forever. And Leonardo wants 30 of them. Today. He says, therefore, a project to capture sunlight using focused membranes. You think it might be a lens, or a trick, or a trap. No one knows for sure. Historians still argue whether some of his more outlandish inventions, like the mechanical lion, the walking robot, or the mirrored death ray, were ever actually built or just sketched to mess with his patrons. You now suspect the pig bladder project is part of that category. As you scrape the translucent membrane, your fingernails turn chalky white. You start to wonder if maybe pig bladder fumes aren't great for human lungs. Sigh walks by wearing a scarf over his mouth and winks. Only the weak get dizzy. You promptly get dizzy. Someone hands you a tincture to sniff, vinegar steeped with rosemary, allegedly to clear the humors. It does not help. You taste it in your throat for the next 3 hours. Meanwhile, the other apprentices are equally miserable. One is grinding shells into powder to make ultramarine. Another is washing rabbit skins to extract glue. A third has been tasked with chasing pigeons out of the rafters again, since one of them pooped on the unfinished sketch of a flying machine. This is not the Renaissance dream you were promised. Leonardo occasionally appears in the doorway, peering over your work with mild disapproval and murmuring things like, "The tension must be even across all quadrants," and "The bladder is a metaphor for the soul, fragile, elastic, prone to rupture." You nod solemnly. You have no idea what he means. Sometimes he'll crouch beside you and sketch directly in the air, fingers tracing invisible lines. "Imagine this," he says, but on a larger scale. A dome of light, a temple of vision. Then he walks away before you can ask what for. You're left with your bucket and your doubts. The pig bladder project takes the entire morning. By the time you stretch the last one over its frame, your fingers are raw, and your back has stiffened like you've slept in a tree. You haven't even seen a paintbrush today. And yet, there's something weirdly satisfying in the grotesque rhythm of it all. The slick stretch of membrane over wood, the sticky vinegar sting in your nose, the murmurs of apprentices measuring pigment ratios by candlelight. It feels like you're part of something ancient, something strange and alive. During your short midday break, Tommaso explains the real reason for the bladder task. Leonardo doesn't believe in apprentices earning paint, he says. chewing on a fig. You earn his trust, first by proving you can stomach the filth, then by showing you can see beauty in it. Beauty, you ask, glancing at the dripping mess clinging to your tunic. He shrugs. You're here, aren't you? A few hours later, you're summoned to the upper room. It's quieter there, brighter too. The windows are high and wide, casting a long rectangle of afternoon sunlight over a huge table. Laid across it are several of your bladders, now dry, smooth, and translucent as parchment. Leonardo is inspecting them, his face inches away, muttering something about tensile refractive illusion. You stand silently until he gestures you over. He holds one bladder up to the light, watches the gold beam bend around the edges. You think it's disgusting, he says, not looking at you. But it bends light like glass. The animal becomes vision. That's art. You nod. You still don't understand, but the way he says it almost makes you believe. Then, without warning, he flicks a finger at the corner of the membrane. A sharp ping. It shudders with a sound like a tiny drum. He grins. And music too. A canvas that sings. You're about to reply when a pigeon crashes through the window. It flaps wildly, drops something onto the table, thankfully not what you fear, and bolts out the other side. Leonardo barely reacts. He just mutters, "Needs netting," and writes something in the margin of his notebook. That notebook, you notice, is filled with backwards writing again. Mirror script. Supposedly to keep people from stealing his ideas, or maybe to confuse future generations. Historians still debate the real reason. You suspect it was just to mess with people like you. As evening sets in, the bladders are hung near the fire to finish curing. The room fills with the odd glow of drying light catchers. You're allowed to eat a heel of bread, a sliver of cheese, and some dried apples. It tastes like victory. And despite everything, the smell, the heat, the pig bits, you realize this is the first time today that Leonardo actually smiled at you. Before we go on, take a breath. This next part might feel surprisingly close to home. The next morning, you are jolted awake, not by a bell, or a rooster, or even Sigh throwing breadcrumbs at your face. Number. It's Leonardo himself, clapping loudly and calling out, "Time for judgment." You think he's kidding. He is not. You scramble up from your straw mat, nearly tripping on your own ankles, and follow the crowd into the main hall. There, laid out on several long tables, are yesterday's works from each apprentice. Sketches, pigment tests, perspective studies, and a few rather sad attempts at human anatomy. Leonardo paces the room like a man preparing to perform brain surgery with a spoon. One by one, he picks up each piece, squints at it, and delivers a verdict. Too timid. Wrong curve. This one looks like a chicken tried to draw a horse. You begin to sweat. You'd hope the pig bladder incident earned you a reprieve, but your sphere studies are clearly next. You can feel everyone's eyes on you. Even the cat. Leonardo picks up your page. He squints, tilts his head, walks to the window, then back to the candlelight. Then he laughs. "It's better than Tommaso's," he says, handing it back with a wink. But that's not saying much. Tommaso shrinks. You exhale, cautiously relieved, until Leonardo leans over your shoulder and says, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Just so you know, the way you shaded this curve makes it look like a buttock. Was that intentional? You want to die. You also want to correct it. You also want to go back to the pig bladders, honestly." Mockery is a morning ritual here, a strangely affectionate one. It's how Leonardo shows he cares, or, at least, that he's paying attention. And it doesn't stop with sketches. That afternoon, you're helping stir a batch of new pigment paste, a blend of verdigris, egg yolk, and crushed glass. When the mix turns a sickly brown, you stare at it, frozen. Did you add too much copper? Leonardo glides in like a hawk spotting prey. Did you confuse half a dram with half a donkey's breakfast? You don't answer. He waves his hand theatrically. It's ruined. But look, beautiful, isn't it? He scoops some of the sludgy mix onto parchment and smears it in wide, curling strokes, like mud in a dream. And just like that, your failure becomes part of a study in textures. Historians still argue whether Leonardo's relentless teasing was harsh mentorship or a strange kind of encouragement. Some describe him as emotionally distant. Others say he had a childlike joy in turning flaws into features. You, however, describe him mostly with muttered curses under your breath. Still, you begin to recognize the pattern. Criticism is always public. Praise, if it comes at all, is subtle and fleeting. Maybe a nod, a hum, or the briefest smile as he pockets one of your sketches instead of tossing it on the reject pile. But you're not safe yet. Later that week, he announces a mock exam. You're given a lump of clay and told to sculpt a human hand. No reference, no notes, just from memory. Easy? Absolutely not. Hands are terrifying. Too many joints, too many curves, and Leonardo is obsessed with them. He calls them the instruments of the soul, which is unfortunate because your version looks like a lobster was stepped on. When he inspects your work, he taps its warped knuckles and asks, "Have you ever seen a hand before?" You glance down at your own, suddenly suspicious of their shape. Another apprentice makes the mistake of arguing back. "It's stylized," he says, trying to sound confident, more interpretive. Leonardo blinks. I didn't realize you were inventing a new species. My apologies." Cue laughter. And then, just when the poor kid thinks it's over, Leonardo brings in a bowl of actual bones. A real skeletal hand, yellowed and delicate. "Compare," he says. Everyone inches closer, half in awe, half in nausea. That's how the workshop works. Public pressure, strange artifacts, and relentless attention to every mistake you make. It keeps you sharp. It keeps you humble. And, in a weird way, it does make you better. Slowly. Barely. Maybe. You begin to anticipate the critiques. You catch errors before he does. You even joke about them. Quietly, when he's out of earshot. There's a kind of gallows humor among the apprentices. A dark, artistic camaraderie. You're all equally exhausted, equally bullied, equally proud when something almost goes right. And there are victories. One evening, you're told to add shadows to a study of draped fabric. You take your time, layering tiny lines, glazing with diluted ink. It's quiet, peaceful. Leonardo walks past. He pauses. Then, almost to himself, he mutters, "That fold is convincing." He doesn't look at you. He just walks away. But the other apprentices heard. Tommaso mouths, "Convincing," like you've just been knighted by the Pope himself. You don't smile. That would break the spell. But inside, your sleep-deprived, pig bladder-stained soul does a small, dignified dance. The anatomy room is quiet. Too quiet. The air is heavy, thick with candle smoke, dried herbs, and something else you don't want to name. You're holding a knife, and across the table lies a corpse. Welcome to your new assignment. Leonardo insisted you were ready. He says that if you wish to understand how a hand paints or how a body moves, you must know what lies beneath the skin. You assumed he meant diagrams, maybe a wax model. You were wrong. This is the real thing. The corpse was delivered at dawn, under a thick canvas sheet. Rumors swirl about where it came from. Some say it's a prisoner. Others whisper about back alley deals with gravediggers. Historians still argue whether Leonardo had official permission for these dissections or simply operated in a moral gray zone thick as Milanese fog. You're not sure which is worse, the mystery or the reality. The room is small, windowless, and lit only by a few flickering tapers. The stone walls are slick with condensation. Leonardo is already here, sketchbook open, quill in hand. He hums quietly as he works, unfazed by the stiffened body before him. You, on the other hand, are trying not to faint. "Hold the wrist," he says, not looking up. You hesitate. He turns to you and raises a brow. "You think Michelangelo skipped this part?" That gets you moving. Barely. Your fingers tremble as you grip the cold, waxy skin. You've never felt anything so not alive. It doesn't feel like sleep or rest. It feels like the end of something. Leonardo draws, describing aloud as he works. Tendons like cords, radius and ulna. The hinge of the wrist mimics the ox cart axle. You watch the lines appear on parchment with impossible speed and precision. He doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. The corpse, meanwhile, has one eye half open. You do not look at it. Leonardo talks on about how the soul animates muscle, how the structure of the body mirrors architecture. He references Vitruvius, geometry, and even the music of organs. You try to listen, but your stomach is twisting itself into knots. Then comes the smell. It's not immediate. At first, there's only the waxy scent of tallow and herbs. But as he begins to cut deeper, a new stench seeps into the air, like rot mixed with iron and mold. Your throat closes. You grip the table. Breathe through your mouth. Tommaso whispers from behind you. And don't lock your knees. That's how Ricardo fainted last time. You nod and try to focus on the candlelight instead of the half-exposed trachea in front of you. Leonardo hands you a tool. Pull the skin back, gently. You hesitate again. He looks at you. Art is about seeing. This is the purest form. You do it. It's horrible. It's fascinating. You pull, and beneath the pale outer layer, something glistens. Muscle, sinew, threads of red and silver. Leonardo leans in like a child examining a snowflake. "See here?" he says, pointing to a muscle. "This contracts when we grip the stylus. Without it, no poetry." He's not wrong. But you're also pretty sure you're going to throw up. The day goes on like this. Observation, dissection, illustration. You help clean the tools afterward with vinegar and coarse linen. There is no soap, no gloves, just the smell of metal and the clinging memory of flesh under your nails. When you're finally dismissed, you spend a solid 10 minutes scrubbing your hands in a bucket until your skin is raw. But you can't stop thinking about it. That night, you dream of joints and tendons, of ribs folding open like cathedral doors, of hearts with names carved into them. You wake up before dawn and find yourself sketching. Not flowers, not birds. The wrist, the elbow, the curve of a clavicle. Something in you has changed. It's disturbing, but also compelling. The next time Leonardo invites you back, you don't hesitate. And this time, the body is different. Younger. Perhaps a woman. The air is colder. Leonardo doesn't speak as much, just draws, his eyes flicking between muscle and parchment. You follow his lead. He hands you a page of notes. "Copy these," he says. You realize they're in his signature mirror script. Your brain aches trying to keep up. Salai, who's been watching from the doorway, snickers. "Careful," he says. That's the page he used to test new students. If you translate it upside down, it says, "I fooled you." He might be lying. You copy it anyway. Around this time, you also learn Leonardo keeps a running notebook titled De Figura Humana, a catalog of anatomy, perspective, and proportion. You see glimpses of it sometimes. Half-dissected arms beside graceful sketches of saints. It's haunting, and yet somehow beautiful. Leonardo talks of someday publishing it. Historians still wonder why he never did. Some say it was too controversial. Others say he was never satisfied. One theory, he kept revising it every time he learned something new, which was always. By your third anatomy session, the corpse doesn't scare you anymore. What scares you is how fascinated you've become. You start to see anatomy everywhere, in the way Sigh lounges on a bench, hip cocked just so, in the curve of Leonardo's finger as he gestures to a fresco, in your own reflection, bones beneath skin. You wonder how much of a person is just tension and tendons, blood and breath. Leonardo once whispered, "To understand life, you must first befriend death." You didn't understand then. Now you're starting to. Let's pause here and imagine for a moment, what would you have done in their place? It starts with a feather, a single white feather that drifts in from the rafters and lands gently on Leonardo's open notebook. He doesn't swat it away. He just stares at it, like it holds the secrets of the universe. Then he looks at you and says, quite seriously, "We're going to spend the next month drawing wings." You laugh. He doesn't. So begins the wing period. Every morning, you're sent into the dusty outskirts of Milan to catch birds, doves, swifts, even the occasional unfortunate chicken, all captured gently and examined closely. You become weirdly good at coaxing them into cages. Your hands get scratched. Your shirt gets soiled. You develop a permanent feather tucked behind one ear like a tragic badge of honor. Back in the workshop, the real work begins. Leonardo has you pluck feathers, study the curve of flight bones, sketch the hollow shafts, and measure angles of lift. At first, you think it's just an artistic study, another one of his fixations. But then he begins talking about machines. "Flight is not divine," he says, sketching furiously on a giant scroll. "It is mechanical. The air is a substance. It can be pushed." You glance at his newest invention, a wooden contraption with canvas wings, pulleys, and a leather seat. It looks like a bat met a bicycle and lost a fight, and he expects you to help build it. Historians still argue whether Leonardo's flying machines were ever tested. No evidence survives of a successful launch. But in the workshop, you test everything, even gravity, the hard way. You're tasked with weaving sinew cords for the wing joints. Sigh, of course, gets the fun job, climbing to the roof to test wind speeds with a homemade streamer. He falls twice. Only once was serious. Leonardo, meanwhile, is obsessed. He rambles about lift and drag while you hammer thin brass rivets into wooden struts. He compares the mechanics of birds to those of the human arm. You realize, with some horror, that the practice wing is mounted with shoulder joints that mimic your own. "We are already flying creatures," he muses. "We just don't know how yet." You're not sure whether that's inspiring or terrifying. Then come the diagrams, dozens of them. Sheets and sheets filled with flapping mechanisms, wing beat ratios, and air current charts. One even includes instructions for how to fall properly. Sigh jokes, that's the one you'll use first. You're the one asked to test the glider prototype. not fly it. Test it. Big difference. You strap the frame to your back, feel the awkward weight of canvas stretching over ribs of wood, and walk up to a small bluff just outside the city. The test involves running and then catching yourself before you trip. Leonardo watches, beaming. You trip. He calls it valuable data. By week 2, your sketches are improving. You've drawn so many wings, you start seeing them in your dreams. You understand the angle of primary feathers. You notice the difference between soaring birds and flapping ones. Leonardo insists even angels should have correctly modeled pectoral muscles. At some point, he tells you to imagine what it would feel like to lift off. Not just the mechanics, but the sensation. Draw the motion of joy, he says, placing your hand on the page and guiding it. You feel ridiculous, but you try, and your pencil curves upward, gently. There are setbacks. One apprentice manages to snap a model wing in half with his elbow. Another accidentally lets a crow escape inside the studio. It poops on a half-finished Madonna. Leonardo laughs for a full minute. You realize this is the most relaxed you've ever seen him. Still, you begin to understand why he's obsessed. Wings are more than anatomy to him. They're poetry, geometry in motion, a metaphor for freedom, for ambition, for the unachievable made almost real. You remember the way he looked at that first feather, like it was a map, like it pointed somewhere he desperately wanted to go. And you start wanting to go there too. One night, he gathers the apprentices and opens a dusty trunk. Inside, his earliest glider prototype, worn, splintered, lovingly mended. I once thought I could jump from the Duomo, he says softly. I never did, but the dreaming, that part, I finished. Everyone is quiet, even Salai. You spend the next day oiling the wood, smoothing the canvas, making it flight ready again. Not to fly, necessarily, just to honor the dream. You sketch it at sunset. It looks like a bird resting, not broken, just waiting. You thought you were here to paint. But today, Leonardo has you boiling walnuts, testing olive oil viscosities, and peeling tiny garlic cloves under a magnifying lens. He's wearing a leather apron and humming softly, stirring something in a pot that looks alarmingly like soup, but isn't. This is not a kitchen. This is a laboratory. Welcome to what historians call Leonardo's everything at once phase, when the workshop becomes less of an artist's studio and more of an alchemist's daydream with a side of mechanical chaos. It starts innocently enough. We're building a new paint mixer, he says one morning. The mortar and pestle is inelegant. You assume he means a better bowl and a longer spoon. You were wrong. By midday, you're constructing a gear-driven contraption powered by a foot pedal that also turns a spit in the back, so it can roast garlic and stir paint at the same time. Why garlic? No one asks anymore. You soon learn that every task leads to another. You're helping test different egg whites for temper paint when suddenly you're mixing them with soot to make invisible ink. Leonardo, wide-eyed, declares it could revolutionize espionage. You don't know who you're spying on. Probably Salai. Next, you're fermenting wine to make varnish, then boiling tree sap, then distilling something in a twisted glass coil that looks suspiciously illegal. The whole studio starts to smell like a strange medieval cocktail. Vinegar, charcoal, cardamom, burnt feathers. You're not sure if this is painting or potion making. One apprentice whispers, "Is he trying to invent immortality?" Another mutters, "No, just soup that paints." Some days, it feels like both. But here's the thing. Some of it works. The varnish gleams. The ink holds. The paint goes down smoother. Leonardo grins like a child with a new toy, and you feel a flicker of pride because you helped make that happen. And then, he decides to build a machine that slices bread diagonally because straight lines are unnatural. That one doesn't go well. You end up cleaning crumbs out of gears for 2 hours, while Salai eats the test loaves and makes snide remarks about modernism. Still, there's a thrill in the madness. You never know what your job will be. One day, you're building a model of a bridge. The next, you're plucking goose quills to test airflow. The next, you're making pasta. Because yes, Leonardo has opinions on that too. And not just the food. He claims long noodles are inefficient and proposes a spiral-shaped design that cooks evenly and is easier to digest. We shall call it fridimazzole. You think he's joking. He is not. He even designs a utensil with rotating tines to better gather sauce. You are now, somehow, testing the ergonomics of a spork prototype in 15th century Milan. Historians still debate whether Leonardo ever submitted these inventions to his patrons or kept them secret for fun. Some believe he truly thought of everything, from water pumps to automatic drum machines. Others say he was just too easily distracted. You suspect it's both. You also learn to stay very quiet when he starts talking about the soul of bread. Amid the chaos, the painting continues. Sort of. You still grind pigment. You still prepare canvases. But now you're doing it while standing next to a mechanical lion that blinks when it hears music. You begin to notice something strange. When you return to more traditional tasks, say, outlining the folds in a saint's robe, you're better. Your hand is steadier. Your eye is sharper. Leonardo's madness has made you sharper too. You start thinking like him. A draped cloth becomes not just shadow and light, but a tension structure. A horse's leg becomes not just muscle and bone, but a series of calculated levers. You look at clouds and wonder how much they weigh. One day, he finds you adjusting the tension on his paint mixer, muttering about torque. He pauses, then nods. You've learned how to see, he says. You try not to smile too hard. Then he hands you a stick of cinnamon and says, "Now test this with vinegar." I think it might be edible ink. Back to the lab. You're mixing yellow pigment when your nose starts to tingle. It's subtle at first, a slight sting, like dust. Then the back of your throat begins to burn. Your tongue goes numb. Your left eye starts to water. You blink, cough, and look down. The pigment bowl in your hand is labeled realgar. That's arsenic. You drop it. Salai, lounging nearby, doesn't even flinch. Oh, that stuff? It's only toxic if you breathe it. You are absolutely breathing it. Welcome to the part of the workshop they don't talk about in painting manuals. The part where half the materials can kill you. Color in the Renaissance was beautiful, and often deadly. Cinnabar, used for rich reds, contains mercury. Lead white, still a favorite among painters, slowly poisons through skin contact. Orpiment, prized for its golden glow, a lovely shade of death. Leonardo has a whole cabinet filled with these little jars of murder, labeled in exquisite handwriting, and you're expected to handle them every day. With your bare hands. No gloves, no masks. Just trust and good ventilation, which you don't have. You quickly learn to tell the difference between the safe-ish pigments and the this-will-end-your-week ones. The blue ones are tricky. Ultramarine, made from lapis lazuli, is safe but expensive. Smalt, made from ground cobalt glass, scratches your skin if you handle it dry. Azurite, gorgeous, but turns black if you so much as sneeze on it. And then there's verdigris, a green made from copper acetate. It looks like melted emeralds. It also eats through parchment if mixed too strongly. Historians still debate whether Leonardo understood the long-term effects of these materials. He wrote warnings about fumes and noted side effects in his notebooks, but he kept using them. Some say he believed the artistic payoff was worth the risk. Others argue he thought he could tame them. Either way, you're now part of the experiment. You notice the other apprentices showing symptoms too. One has permanently stained fingernails. Another sneezes metallic dust. Tommaso's voice is hoarse all the time, and he claims it's just paint throat. You're pretty sure that's not a real medical term. Leonardo occasionally brings out a bucket of wine-soaked cloths and insists you wipe your hands with those. It neutralizes the poison, he says. Does it? You're unconvinced. He also gives you tonics made of crushed rosemary, wine vinegar, and occasionally garlic. Keeps the humors balanced, he claims, handing you a cup with a bit of mint on top. It tastes like punishment. Then there's the time you're tasked with grinding lead white and forget to wear a dust rag over your mouth. You spend the rest of the afternoon seeing little stars that are not part of the fresco. Later, Salai chuckles. It's how we separate the strong from the dead. You're starting to wonder if you've been slowly poisoning yourself for a month. But here's the thing. Those colors are glorious. The reds glow like firelight. The blues shimmer like evening sky. The golds look like they could melt. When Leonardo finishes a Madonna's robe with one of your batches, you forget the nausea and the burning nose. You feel like you've made magic. It's addictive. You also begin to understand how high the stakes are. If you mix wrong, too much linseed oil, too little binder, or the pigment ratio is off, the entire layer cracks after a week, or bubbles, or turns green. Leonardo insists on testing each batch on sample panels first. Some of these he buries outside to see how they weather. Others he hangs above the fireplace and checks for smoke resilience. You're pretty sure that one's just to make use of the chimney heat. One night, he pulls you aside and shows you a panel that's turned a sickly brown. Failed, he says simply. Not your fault. The recipe was wrong. You brace for mockery. Instead, he adds, failure is color's first truth. Even light learns by breaking. You don't entirely get it, but you write it down anyway. There are moments of levity in all this madness. One afternoon, someone mistakes a jar of ochre for powdered mustard and adds it to bread dough. The resulting paint loaf is so dense it cracks the workbench. Salai keeps a chunk of it as a paperweight. You name it, the yellow disaster. Some days, Leonardo talks about inventing safe pigments. He wants to find a blue that doesn't cost as much as a horse, a red that doesn't rot your gums, a green that doesn't melt its own canvas. Historians agree, he never did, but you admire that he kept trying. You catch yourself thinking the same way. What if this ratio works? What if we replace lead with eggshell? What if we boil the copper twice? It's not just about safety, it's about control. Mastering color, mastering material, mastering the invisible forces that make something either divine or a disaster. And so, even as your fingertips tingle and your nose won't stop running, you keep going. Because that next color, just maybe, will be perfect. If your mind started drifting just now, that's all right. The past has a way of lulling us gently. You've been working on the horse for 3 weeks. Not a horse, mind you. The horse. The colossal clay model that Leonardo has promised to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. It's supposed to be the largest equestrian statue the world has ever seen. And you're elbow deep in mud, smoothing the beast's backside with a goat hair brush. This is not what you pictured when you dreamed of becoming an artist. The workshop has transformed into something between a construction site and a theater set. Massive scaffolding surrounds the clay form. Buckets of water, bags of straw, and vats of tempera are everywhere. The model itself is 24 feet tall and twice as long. Its legs are the size of wine barrels. The head alone could eat you. Leonardo has gone full maestro, striding around in his long robe, flinging orders, shouting about balance, about tension, about motion frozen in stillness. You're not sculpting anymore. You're assisting a Renaissance logistics operation. And here's the twist. The statue will never be finished. Not really. Historians still debate whether the horse would have worked. Some argue the mold was too complex. Others believe the casting process was flawed. The truth? It was never tested. War broke out before it could happen. The bronze meant for the statue was melted down to make cannons. But you don't know that yet. Right now, all you know is this horse is demanding your soul. Every morning, you water the clay to keep it moist. Every afternoon, you brush it smooth. Every evening, you refill cracks that dry too quickly. And all the while, Leonardo watches, sketching obsessively, muttering about the way a horse thinks with its spine. You've seen him spend entire hours studying a live horse, his eyes following its ears, its blink, its breath. The soul is in the neck, he says one day, without context. You nod. That seems as valid as anything else. Then he hands you a wooden paddle and tells you to sculpt with rhythm. You have no idea what that means, but you try anyway. Thumping, smoothing, shaping. Somehow, it works. One day, you're asked to climb the scaffolding and help reshape the horse's nostrils. You nearly fall. Twice. Salai, watching from below, laughs so hard he chokes on a fig. When you finally make it down, covered in clay and curses, Leonardo gives you the faintest of nods. Courage is form, he says. You're not sure if that's praise or poetry, but it's something. Then there's the tail. The tail is cursed. It refuses to hold shape. Every night, it slumps. Every morning, it cracks. Leonardo redesigns it 5 times. At one point, he considers making it a mechanical tail that sways with the wind. Too ambitious, you mutter. He hears you. You say that like it's a bad thing, he replies. Touché. Despite everything, the backaches, the clay-stained clothes, the sunburn, you feel part of something huge, something mythic. When you walk past the statue, you forget it's clay. It feels like a horse. It breathes. It waits. Then one day, a letter arrives from the Duke. War has come. The bronze is needed for weapons. The workshop falls silent. Leonardo doesn't rage, doesn't cry. He just walks to the statue and places a hand on its flank. So, he says quietly, you won't gallop after all. The apprentices whisper. The studio stills. Leonardo turns to all of you and says, but you see it, don't you? You can finish it in your mind. And just like that, the statue is complete, if only in imagination. Later that week, a pigeon lands on its nose. Salai names it the Duke. You all laugh finally. The statue is never cast. Years later, French soldiers will use the clay model for target practice. It will crumble. But tonight, it still stands tall in the workshop, impossibly grand, impossibly patient, frozen mid-stride, as if dreaming of a gallop that never comes. And you helped make it. If the clay horse demanded your body, then working under the Duke demands your sanity. You learn quickly that art in Renaissance Milan isn't just about creativity, it's about politics. And unfortunately, politics don't come with a paintbrush. They come with sharp eyes, whispered threats, and the ever-present fear of stepping one sandal out of line. Ludovico Sforza, Il Moro, the Duke of Milan, is not your average patron. He is clever, calculating, and always watching. He strolls through the workshop without warning, boots echoing on stone, hands behind his back, expression unreadable. If he pauses to examine your work, you do not breathe. If he asks you a question, you answer with 3 layers of courtesy, 1 apology, and a smile that doesn't reach your eyes. Leonardo seems unfazed. He talks to the Duke like they're old friends, equals even. But you notice the way he straightens his tunic before those visits. The way he stops mid-task to arrange sketches just so. There's tension in the air when Ludovico arrives, like everyone's holding their breath under their palettes. And sometimes he brings guests, nobles, bankers, foreign dignitaries. Once, even a man from Florence who wouldn't stop bragging about Botticelli. You're made to stand in the corner, holding trays of sketches or bowls of fresh pigment, pretending not to exist, while these lords evaluate Leonardo's genius like it's a pastry. Too moody, one says, pointing at a Madonna's eyes. Not enough grandeur, another sniffs at a mural. Leonardo only smiles. But later, you find the entire composition reworked overnight. Historians still argue whether Leonardo was a political creature or just someone too brilliant to ignore. He stayed in the Duke's good graces for years, survived court intrigue, and even designed war machines on commission. But you see the strain behind his calm. One evening, after a long day of sketching siege weapons, yes, that's a thing now, Leonardo says softly, "The Duke wants glory carved into stone, but stone breaks. Ideas don't." You nod, unsure whether he's reassuring you or himself. And those siege weapons? They're horrifying. Spiked chariots, giant crossbows, mobile towers with retractable bridges. Leonardo treats it all like an engineering puzzle. You, on the other hand, are just trying not to picture these machines in action, in war. You ask him once, "Do you really think these will be used?" He looks away. "I design so others don't have to. If they see the machine, maybe they will choose peace." You're not sure that's how dukes think. Speaking of dukes, Ludovico has opinions. He changes his mind faster than you can mix new pigment. He once ordered a portrait background painted blue, then sent a note midweek demanding red to match the drapery of divine prophecy. You repaint the entire background overnight. He never even comes to see it. Then there's the security. You're warned not to talk to certain visitors. Some wear masks. Others leave scrolls without signatures. One man asks to see Leonardo's most recent vision of the flying soldier. You tell him there is no such thing. He smiles and leaves a coin anyway. You keep the coin. You're not proud of it. Leonardo himself walks a careful line. He charms the Duke's courtiers with jokes, dazzles the guests with drawings, and yet always avoids giving anyone a clear answer about what he's working on next. He calls it creative diplomacy. You call it exhausting. And the stress trickles down. One apprentice is suddenly dismissed. No explanation. His belongings are gone by sunset. You don't ask questions. You just work harder, sleep less, nod more. You learn to blend into the walls when tempers flare. You learn to paint while pretending not to listen. You learn that silence can be louder than speech, and safer. One day, you overhear Leonardo arguing with a courier. Something about a delayed commission. Something about Florence. You catch one phrase. The Duke forgets even the sun has a season. The next morning, Leonardo's mood is like the fog over the canals. Thick, impenetrable, cold. He doesn't speak all day, just draws, and draws, and draws. But that night, when you bring him a fresh ink pot, he simply says, "Art survives, power doesn't. Remember that." You do. You remember it every time the Duke's guards pass by the workshop. Every time a noble sneers at your sketches. Every time someone's name disappears from the roster. And still, you paint. Still, you stay. Because behind all the politics, there is still beauty, still wonder, still the moment when a blank panel becomes something sacred. And in those quiet seconds, when the world outside fades, you almost forget the Duke entirely. Almost. By now, you think you've seen everything Leonardo has to offer. Paints, machines, corpses, flight. But then one morning, you walk into the workshop and find him in the kitchen, elbow deep in roast goose and powdered graphite. You blink. He looks up, delighted. Ah, perfect timing. Tell me, how do you feel about cinnamon as a base coat? You're not sure how to answer that. It turns out the kitchen is Leonardo's other studio. And today, it's an explosion of culinary chaos, half-finished blueprints, and a faint smell of scorched honey. Because he's decided to redesign everything. The utensils, the oven, the recipes. He's sketching mechanical spits that rotate automatically by candle heat. Ladles with measuring notches. Cutting boards that slope juice into copper basins for collection. He wants a machine that shapes soft cheese into precise cubes. A pasta press that creates mathematically elegant noodles. And you? You've been assigned to test the brushes made from cooked spaghetti. No, seriously. He believes starch-treated pasta strands, if cut and dried correctly, will behave like fine sable hair. It's cheaper and edible, he says proudly. You try it. It is not fine sable hair. The brush splatters pigment across the table, hits Salah in the face, and ruins 3 hours of work. You hear snickering from the back room. Leonardo frowns. Too al dente. The experiments continue. Some of them are brilliant. The rotating spit? Genius. You watch an entire roast chicken brown evenly over 4 hours with no human help. The sauce stirrer, powered by dripping water, saves the kitchen boy's wrist. Others, less successful. The cheese slicer explodes. The self-turning ladle splashes boiling stock onto your foot. And the music oven, meant to play lute notes when heated, melts its strings and nearly sets the kitchen on fire. Still, you admire the audacity of it all. Historians often overlook this side of Leonardo, but his notebooks are full of culinary curiosities, menus, ideal kitchen layouts, and even a to-do list that includes invent a no-smoke chimney. Some scholars believe he once worked in a tavern. Others think food was simply another canvas to explore balance, precision, and design. You start to understand. To Leonardo, cooking isn't separate from art. It is art. A sauce has harmony. A roast has form. Bread has rhythm. One day, he hands you a ball of dough and says, "Flatten this into a perfect circle. No tools, just intuition." You fail miserably. It looks like the boot of Sicily. He sighs, then smiles. Even failure has flavor. Later, while testing edible glazes, he realizes one batch of sugar gel refracts light beautifully when dried. "We'll try it on glass." he says excitedly, already scribbling notes for a new painting technique using candy. Salai, meanwhile, eats half of it. You've made art you can taste, he says, crumbs in his hair. Despite the chaos, something shifts in the studio. Apprentices start volunteering for kitchen duty. There's laughter, music. The scent of rosemary replaces the usual vinegar. For a moment, the workshop doesn't feel like a crucible. It feels like a home. You even start incorporating kitchen techniques into your painting. You layer color like you would sauces. Light first, then rich accents. You dab backgrounds with sponges soaked in herb water to create texture. You grind nutshells into powder for a subtle shimmer in skin tones. One evening, while glazing a fruit tart, you realize you've developed more patience in the kitchen than you ever had in the studio. And that patience carries over. Your brushwork slows. Your eye sharpens. Even Leonardo notices. He says, "See? It's all the same. Canvas, plate, sky, U-shape experience." Then he serves you an egg tart so perfectly browned, it looks like it was painted with sun. Not everything is idyllic. The Duke's guests still appear now and then, demanding extravagant feasts prepared by the genius artist. Leonardo obliges, presenting meals that double as physics demonstrations. One night, he unveils a bread sculpture of a cathedral that collapses precisely at dessert. Applause follows. So do bribes. You suspect this might be the most profitable thing he's ever made. And yet, the workshop always returns to its humble rhythm. A loaf here, a sketch there, a brush cleaned in wine, a burner used to heat varnish and garlic. You never expected to learn cooking in the pursuit of art. But now, you can't imagine art without it. If you asked anyone else in the workshop who they'd least like to share a room with, the answer would be unanimous. Salai. Officially named Gian Giacomo Caproti, Salai arrived at Leonardo's doorstep years before you did. Dirty, mischievous, and charming in the most exhausting way possible. He's been here ever since. And somehow, despite breaking more things than he fixes, he remains Leonardo's favorite. No one understands why. He barely paints. He borrows materials without asking. He once swapped your sketchbook for a sausage and claimed it was an experiment in comparative anatomy. You didn't laugh. He did, for days. But Leonardo calls him my little devil, a term said with affection, not frustration. Salai struts around the workshop like he owns the place. His tunic is always slightly better tailored, his palette always more stocked. He somehow gets out of the worst chores. No pig bladders, no corpse duty. And when he does get assigned work, he either delegates it or disappears halfway through. And yet, he stays. And Leonardo keeps him. Historians still debate their relationship. Some say Salai was a muse. Others, a model. Some suggest something deeper, emotional, maybe romantic. No one really knows. The letters are vague. The paintings, subtle. All that's certain is, Salai mattered to Leonardo. And to you, he's a walking contradiction. You try to avoid him. But one evening, you're paired together to prepare materials for a new mural. It's a disaster from the start. He shows up late, spills water on your sketches, and spends most of the time whittling a stick into a wand. You ask, "Are you going to help or just ruin the lighting?" He grins. Ruin is a kind of help. It shows where the strength is. You consider throwing a gesso bucket at him. But as the night wears on, something shifts. He starts actually working, mixing plaster, measuring proportions with surprising accuracy. You notice his hands are steadier than expected. He hums while working, some old Milanese tune about wine and pickpockets. And when Leonardo stops by to check the progress, Salai presents your shared panel with a flourish, saying, "All credit to the genius here. I just stirred the soup." You blink. "That was generous." Leonardo chuckles. "And spilled half of it, I imagine." Salai winks and disappears again, like smoke. Later, Tommaso tells you a story. Salai once broke the leg off a sculpture Leonardo had spent weeks on, he says, eyes wide. We all thought he'd be thrown out. But Leonardo just sighed and said, "At least now we'll learn how to sculpt a limp." You realize Salai's magic trick. He never hides his chaos. He owns it. And somehow, Leonardo sees possibility in it. There are times when Salai shows surprising wisdom. He explains, without being asked, how to fold parchment so it doesn't curl. He teaches a new apprentice how to mimic candlelight with crushed saffron. Once, he catches you overworking a face and mutters, "You're painting what you know. Try painting what you remember instead." You freeze, because that's exactly what was wrong, and he knew it. You start to suspect Salai might not be as careless as he pretends. Maybe it's all performance. Maybe he's the only one who figured out how to survive Leonardo's orbit without burning out. Still, he steals your bread again the next morning. But he also leaves you a tiny drawing in return. Your profile, asleep, with a caption, "Too good for this hell." You don't tell anyone. Over time, you start to laugh when he pulls pranks. Not all of them, but some. You exchange glances during boring lectures, share smuggled cherries during break. You're still rivals, but the edge has softened. Salai is chaos, but he's alive. And in a world ruled by exact proportions and impossible expectations, that counts for something. One evening, as Leonardo prepares for another court visit, he calls Salai over, hands him a folded sketch, a tiny commission, something secret. You catch a glimpse. It's a portrait of you. You never posed for it. But the eyes are right. Salai glances at you, smirks, and tucks it into his vest. You don't ask questions. Some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. Still with me? Good. This is where the story begins to shift. Leonardo calls it a demonstration of force. You call it completely insane. It begins with an offhand comment during breakfast. Leonardo musing about the elegance of controlled combustion. You think he's just being poetic again. Then he gestures to a locked chest in the corner of the workshop and says, "Time to test the flame siphon." You blink. The what? He smiles. The flamethrower. That's when you start looking for the nearest exit. The chest opens with a creak and a puff of dried herbs. Inside, brass tubes, clay pots, and a terrifying tangle of leather bellows, valves, and metal piping. There's also a small keg labeled "Don't Drop." That's never good. Leonardo isn't joking. He's been sketching military inventions for months. Giant crossbows, armored tanks, canal-diverting devices, and yes, fire-based weaponry. Some of them might be theoretical. Some are prototypes. And now, you're about to light one. Historians still argue whether any of Leonardo's war machines were actually built. There's no record of them seeing battle. Some believe he created them purely to impress patrons. Others say he wanted to understand destruction in order to prevent it. Either way, you're now the apprentice holding the match. You're outside in a muddy courtyard with the entire workshop watching. Salai has found the best seat, on top of a hay bale, snacking on grapes. Tommaso is already hiding behind a wheelbarrow. Leonardo hands you a torch and says, "When I signal, insert it into the chamber." You stare at the metal pipe mounted on a wooden stand. It looks suspiciously like a chimney had a baby with a wine funnel. What's the worst that could happen, you ask? Leonardo replies, an explosion, but a beautiful one. You don't feel reassured? He signals. You step forward. The torch flickers in your hand. You insert it into the port, step back, and wait. There's a loud huff of air. Then, whoosh! A column of orange fire shoots out of the pipe, igniting the target, an old canvas dummy dressed like a French soldier. The flame whooshes, then sputters, then belches, coating the courtyard in an acrid cloud of vinegar and sulfur. Salai whoops. Someone cheers. Someone else coughs violently. Leonardo beams. Adjust the bellows pressure, he says. Next time we'll shape the flame like a dragon's breath. You survive. Barely. Later, while cleaning soot off your face, you wonder if this is still an art apprenticeship or an audition for the world's most dangerous carnival. The workshop is quiet the next morning. Too quiet. Until you find Leonardo tinkering with a new design. He wants a portable version. He sketches a device meant to strap to a soldier's back, using pressure from heated oil to ignite a controlled burst of flame. We could call it the Fire Angel, he murmurs. You suggest something more honest, like Deathbox. He laughs. You're not sure if he takes you seriously. As strange as it is, there's a method behind the madness. Leonardo talks endlessly about the balance of fear and beauty, about how even destruction has form. He compares flame to brushstroke, the curve of a jet of fire to the arch of an eyebrow. Everything is motion, he says, even horror. He's not wrong. Still, you notice fewer apprentices are volunteering to help with his field tests. One evening, he pulls you aside and shows you a folded sheet from his war machine portfolio. It's a design for a spinning cannon with a rotating fuse system. You stare. It'll never be built, he says softly. Too effective. Too eager. You ask, then why draw it? He looks you dead in the eye. Because if I can imagine it, someone else can too. I'd rather beat them to the design and hide it. You hadn't thought of it that way. Later, you find a few of his war sketches smudged, crossed out, folded over, with annotations like never show or only if desperate. It dawns on you. Leonardo's not just designing these for use. He's cataloging possibility, both brilliant and terrible. He once told a nobleman, I can paint your son's face and also design the weapon that destroys your enemies. The choice is yours. That nobleman became a regular patron. You, however, now flinch every time someone lights a candle too quickly. Still, there's something intoxicating about fire. Its wildness, its elegance. When it's controlled, it does exactly what you want and reveals everything. Like art, like truth, like Leonardo himself. You're painting a halo, a delicate glow, soft, radiant, ethereal. The kind of glow that says, this person is holy, but also has great skin. You've spent 5 hours just on the underpainting. Why? Because Leonardo insists that a halo isn't just a circle. It's light itself, mathematically perfected, layered with such care that even God would pause to admire the gradient. You sigh and pick up your smallest brush. 3 squirrel hairs bound with wax and patience. The Virgin Mary's head waits silently on the panel, her curls already sculpted with a precision that feels impossible. And that's the problem. You're not just painting a religious icon. You're painting a concept, one that must feel divine and human, weightless and real, all at once. Leonardo appears behind you like a ghost. More gold, he says softly, pointing. But not gold, gold that blushes. You blink. What does that mean? He smiles. Figure it out. This is normal now. Leonardo no longer explains things in direct terms. Everything is metaphor, or music, or memory. You've learned to decipher his riddles, to guess the difference between light like sorrow and light like breakfast. The curls come next. You thought halos were hard? Curls are nightmares. Leonardo believes each strand should follow the logic of natural geometry. Spirals, arcs, golden ratios. A single misplaced curl, he says, can collapse the emotional architecture of the entire piece. You're not even sure what that means anymore, but you nod and return to layering highlight over shadow, breath held like a novice monk. The model for this virgin was a real woman. You met her once. She brought figs and asked questions about how long she'd need to sit. She had a kind laugh and a crooked front tooth, which Leonardo loved. Perfection is dull, he told her. Asymmetry whispers truth. You remember that? So you paint the left eyelid slightly lower. You soften one corner of her mouth. The halo, still in progress, radiates with a quiet pulse, like it's not just reflecting light, but remembering it. Historians still argue how Leonardo created such luminous effects with such limited materials. There are theories, secret binders, egg tempers, varnish layers so thin they split light like crystal. No one's certain. You think it was obsession, the kind that turns hours into dust and breath into brushwork. Next to you, Tommaso is painting a saint's sandal. He mutters curses under his breath. Something about how Jesus never walked in shoes like this. Across the room, Salai is sketching an angel who looks suspiciously like himself. Again. And Leonardo? He's crouched on the floor, adjusting the tilt of a stool to match a dream he had about clouds. He says clouds are just God's thoughts made heavy. Sure. As you shade the folds of the Virgin's robe, Leonardo wanders over and sets a feather on your desk. Reference this, he says. It's how the wind wants to move. You add a swirl to the robe's hem that echoes the feather's curve. He nods. And just when you think he might praise you, he points to the fingernail on Mary's thumb and says, "That one looks like she bites it." Back to work. But in a weird way, that is praise. You lose track of time. The halo becomes an echo of every candle you've ever watched flicker. The curls, tight at the base, softening into air, start to breathe. The hands, gently folded, hold nothing and everything at once. When the final glaze dries, Leonardo studies it in silence. Then, the light works, but only if the viewer has ever known love. You wonder if you have. You're not sure, but the painting has. It remembers. You're just beginning to feel comfortable, finally understanding the rhythm of the workshop, the moods of Leonardo, even the smell of burnt varnish in the morning. When he looks up from a letter and says, quite casually, "Pack everything. We're going to Florence." You blink. Wait, what? He nods, already rolling up sketches. We've been summoned. Summoned, like knights, or chess pieces. And just like that, your world unravels. The workshop, this strange, sacred chaos you've called home, is dismantled in less than 2 days. Canvases rolled, pigments packed, panels crated. Even the cat is stuffed into a sack. Don't worry, it gets out 3 times. You don't even get to say goodbye to the courtyard where you nearly set yourself on fire, or to the massive, unfinished horse now gathering dust like a monument to ambition. Historians still debate why Leonardo left Milan so abruptly. Some say it was political fallout. Others suggest new commissions, or restlessness, or Florence pulling him back like a magnet. The The truth? Probably a little of everything. All you know is, you're moving. Again. The journey is long. Days on foot. Mud. Rain. You carry crates. You twist your ankle. Salai somehow convinces a merchant to let him ride half the way in a vegetable cart, then complains the cabbage bruised his hip. Leonardo walks in silence for hours, staring at clouds, muttering about the geometry of hills. He sketches while walking. You don't ask how. And finally, Florence. It's louder than Milan, tighter. It smells like soap and fresh ink, and too many opinions. The buildings lean toward you like eavesdropping neighbors. People know Leonardo here. They stare, whisper, bow. You set up the new studio in a cramped, sun-drenched space above a baker's shop. It's hot. It's noisy. You love it. But everything's different. New city, new patrons, new politics. And Leonardo? He shifts. He's more focused somehow, more internal. He still experiments, but with intensity, like he's racing something unseen. He wakes earlier, eats less, talks to pigeons more. You ask him once if he misses Milan. He shrugs. The studio is a lens, not a home. Then he starts painting a wall. Yes, a wall. Not a canvas, not a panel. A full fresco, smack in the middle of a monastery hall. You're assigned to mix plaster, which must be applied quickly, section by section, before it dries. It's chaos all over again. Florentine plaster, Leonardo mutters darkly, has the patience of a drunk goose. You start over, twice. But as days pass, the image emerges. A battle scene, chaotic, muscular, human. Horses clash, men twist, faces scream. It's nothing like his religious work. Walang halos. No saints. Just motion. Raw and furious. Leonardo says it's about struggle. The kind inside people. The kind inside himself. The fresco starts to sweat in the humidity. One day, the paint runs. You all panic. Leonardo just watches it slide and whispers, even battles bleed. The work continues. New apprentices arrive, some good, some loud. You become the one they ask for advice. You teach them how to not faint during varnish prep, how to translate Leonardo's riddles, how to avoid Salai's pranks. You didn't notice it before, but now you're the veteran, and still you paint by candlelight, with raw sienna, on cloth, on stone, in silence. You begin to carry your own sketchbook. You begin to look at the world the way he does, not just seeing, but measuring, imagining, questioning. Why does a shadow fall this way? How would this emotion look in marble? Florence makes you sharper. It also makes you homesick for a place that never really belonged to you. You dream of Milan, of the horse, of the workshop smell, of that moment, brief and perfect, when a painting whispered back. One evening, Leonardo shows you a new drawing. It's a city, but not any city that exists. A dream city. Bridges, water, towers built like tree trunks, roads layered in loops. It's alive. You ask, where is this? He smiles. Someday. And you realize, Florence is just another stepping stone. For him. For you. For everything. You're standing in the courtyard, holding a jar of olive oil and a cloth soaked in ammonia, wondering, again, if this is actually part of your job. It is. You're testing varnish. Again. Not because the last batch failed, but because Leonardo is chasing something new. He wants a glaze that doesn't yellow with time. A finish that's luminous, but not sticky. One that breathes, reflects, protects, and ideally smells slightly of rosemary. You've been here before. You boil resins. You stir beeswax. You whisper to the oil as it cools, like it's a living thing. One batch turns cloudy. Another melts the pigment. A third hardens in the jar, like caramel left in the sun. Leonardo calls them near misses. You call them sticky disasters. And you're not alone. The other apprentices are deep in similar trials. One is mixing ox bile with wine. Another is scraping dried yolk from panels, muttering about fat ratios. Sigh is trying to infuse his glaze with lavender, for the mood, he says, only to discover it smells like burnt soap. Still, the search continues. Leonardo refuses to accept that his materials might be the best they can be. He's convinced there's something better, something no one's discovered, something that could make color eternal. Historians still argue whether he ever found it. Some claim the mysterious depth of his later works came from lost varnish recipes. Others insist it was all technique, all layering, no alchemy, no miracle glaze. But you've seen the notes. You've stirred the miracle glaze yourself. It's batch number 47, and it almost worked. For 2 glorious days, it sat on a test panel in the sunlight, shimmering like water on marble. Then it bubbled, peeled, cracked like pastry. Leonardo simply murmured, "Closer," and moved on. You wanted to scream, but you didn't. You just made batch number 48. There's a rhythm to it now, a strange, almost meditative repetition. Stir, test, fail, repeat. You've memorized how each ingredient behaves, how pine resin reacts to heat, how mastic dissolves in turpentine, how the light changes when the oil is fresh versus when it's tired. You become tuned to the materials. You start experimenting on your own, mixing formulas at night, testing dry times in secret. One evening, you catch yourself labeling a jar number 51 before Leonardo even asks. He notices, and he says nothing. But the next day, your jar is on his desk. You feel like you've passed some invisible test. Meanwhile, everything else in the workshop continues as usual. Sketches are torn, paintings are started, left unfinished, reworked, destroyed, reborn. A Madonna you've been assisting on for weeks is suddenly transformed into a portrait of a noblewoman's daughter because the patron changed his mind. You just nod and repaint the chin. Even your own experiments start to blend into one another. One canvas has 15 layers of failed glaze. Another has a fingerprint trapped in the varnish, a little ghost, preserved forever. Leonardo calls them histories. You call them messes that might be miracles. Occasionally, he stops by to peer at your samples. "This one breathes," he'll say, tapping a gloss so faint it's nearly invisible. Or, "This one's arrogant, too shiny." You write it all down, even the strange words, especially the strange words. You're not the only one obsessed. Tommaso starts cataloging every crack in his drying boards. Sigh invents a drying rack that spins with the heat of the fireplace. One apprentice builds a test wall in the courtyard and begins weathering panels like he's preparing for war. The workshop turns into a lab, and still, none of it is perfect. But you get close. So close that one day, Leonardo takes a finished panel, glazed with your latest formula, and hangs it in direct sunlight. A week passes. No cracks, no yellowing, no tackiness. It glows. You hold your breath. Leonardo stands beside you and whispers, "Now imagine this on a ceiling." You imagine, and it feels like falling upward. It happens without warning. One morning, you step into the studio, expecting the usual chaos. Sigh arguing with the cat, Tommaso boiling bones for glue, Leonardo talking to a fig tree. But instead, you find the room still. Quiet. Too quiet. And then Tommaso tells you, he's gone. Gone? Gone. Leonardo has left for France. You feel your throat tighten, your heart drop. You knew he'd been writing letters. There were whispers about a French king who wanted a genius of his very own. But you didn't expect it to happen this fast. No farewell, no speech, no cryptic note written in mirror script, just gone. You find his desk swept clean, the candle snuffed out. His last drawing is still drying on the easel, some strange machine that looks half like a flower and half like a compass. It's unfinished. Of course it is. Leonardo always leaves before the end. Historians will later confirm the timeline. He was invited to Amboise by King Francis I, promised comfort, funding, peace. He took a few paintings, some notebooks, and Salai. Yes, Salai went too. You wish you could say you're surprised, but you're not. You just didn't expect the ache to feel this real, like a rope has been cut inside your chest. The workshop doesn't collapse overnight, but it starts to sag at the edges. The patron visits stop. The commissions slow. The laughter fades. A few apprentices pack up quietly and leave. One of them takes his sketches. Another leaves a loaf of bread and a thank you note. You stay. Why? You're not even sure. Maybe it's loyalty. Maybe it's inertia. Maybe it's that you don't know who you are outside these walls anymore. The pigeons keep coming. You feed them. You start opening the studio in the mornings yourself, mixing pigments, sweeping. You find half-finished canvases tucked in the storage crates. You finish one, then another. You teach one of the newer boys how to stretch canvas. You show another how to hold a brush. You find yourself repeating Leonardo's phrases, draw what the air forgets, as if they're scripture. They are now. You begin noticing things he left behind. A sketch of a bridge folded into an anatomy book. A dried flower pressed between pages of mirror script notes. An unfinished Madonna whose eyes seem to watch you as you work. You swear one day you hear his voice. More blush in the cheeks. Memory lives there. You correct the cheeks. You find a letter addressed to no one, just to my future apprentice. Inside are pages of advice, notes, formulae, and at the end, what I failed to finish, finish boldly. You cry for the first time in weeks. Later, Tommaso comes back from a trip to the city and says Leonardo's name is already being whispered across Europe. Genius, mystic, trickster, prophet. They say the French king keeps him like a jewel. They say he's painting again, or inventing, or simply wandering gardens. You don't know what to believe, so you paint, quietly, daily, without fanfare. You finish a series of saints. You begin sketching flying machines in the margins of grocery lists. You develop your own glaze, batch number 63. You call it Milan Sunset. No one knows the name. That's okay. One morning, you walk past the old supply cabinet and find a folded piece of parchment wedged behind the jar of cobalt blue. You open it. It's a drawing, a little messy, full of charm. It's you, asleep, probably after another long day. Your mouth slightly open, a brush tucked behind your ear. Signed, in tiny script, Salai. You laugh. Then you cry again. Years from now, tourists will marvel at Leonardo's paintings. Scholars will write volumes about his notebooks. Kings will frame his drawings in gold. And no one will remember your name. But someone, someday, will stand in front of a halo that breathes light, a robe that folds like smoke, a gaze that knows, and you'll be there, unseen, but present, forever caught in the brushstrokes of a man who never finished anything, except the people who loved him. I wonder, has any part of this story reminded you of someone you know? There's dust on your hands. Fine, powdery dust. The kind that settles only after months of silence. The workshop is still now. It creaks in the afternoon sun. The windows haven't been opened in days, but the light still finds its way in, curling over shelves, crawling across the floor like a quiet cat. You sit at the table where Leonardo used to sketch. The scratches are still there, the ones he made with his left hand, even when his right hand was full of brushes. There's a smudge of oil where Salai spilled varnish 2 years ago. You never cleaned it. You couldn't. Your hands move without thinking, grinding pigment, soaking linen, adjusting canvas. This is muscle memory now, like prayer, like breath. The rituals you never asked for, but somehow became sacred anyway. There's no more shouting, no more frantic commissions, no more lectures about clouds or wings, or how garlic is the secret to divine proportion. Just you. And the echoes. The studio has become a kind of archive. Unfinished panels, broken tools, a half-mixed batch of tempera that dried in its shell, like an egg waiting to hatch. It's all still here. All of it waiting, whispering. And every whisper sounds like him. You dream differently now. In pigment swirls, in structural sketches, in backwards text, you can now read without thinking. You wake in the middle of the night, scribble something, fall asleep with chalk on your cheek. You've become what you once feared, a keeper of obsessions. But there's peace in it too. You open old boxes and find memories you forgot. A brush chewed at the tip, yours. A pigment jar labeled with your handwriting. A diagram with your corrections penciled in the margins. You've been here longer than you realized. You think about leaving sometimes. There's a rumor of work in Venice, another workshop in Bologna. Some noble in Mantua wants a new chapel ceiling. But every time you pack your tools, you stop. Because this place isn't just where Leonardo worked. It's where you became you. So instead, you paint. A quiet little portrait. A woman you remember from market. Her hands folded, her gaze just slightly off-center, as though she's listening to something no one else hears. No one commissioned it, no one asked. But still, you paint. You try a new glaze. Batch number 64. It shines. You hang the painting by the window. And for a moment, just a moment, you think it glows, the way Leonardo used to smile when something finally worked. Then you smile too. You hear footsteps. A young apprentice, maybe 12, standing in the doorway, fidgeting with a sketch roll. You forgot he was coming today. You nod to him, point to the brushes. He steps inside, nervous, wide-eyed. Start with ochre, you say gently. Not too thick. He nods and goes to work. And just like that, the studio breathes again. So now, listener, let your breath slow. Let your eyes soften. You've walked through clay and pigment, through midnight dissections and paintings that never dried. You've brushed halos into being and boiled bladders until they gleamed. You've seen a genius up close and survived it. Maybe even became part of it. The candlelight still flickers on the wall. Somewhere, a pot of varnish cools. Somewhere, a pigeon waits to land on a sculpture that was never cast. And in the corner of a sun-warmed room, a hand reaches again for a brush. Gently, silently. There's comfort in knowing you don't need to be remembered to have mattered. That sometimes, the touch of your hand on a canvas, or the pigment you once mixed, or the advice you whispered to a younger artist, is the legacy. Leonardo didn't finish everything, but that's the point. The work keeps going. It passes through hands, through centuries, through stories like this one. So rest now. You've earned it. Let the quiet hold you. Let the softness of linen and light lull you. You're safe in the studio now. There's nothing left to prove, just stillness and the gentle rhythm of a brush on wood. forever.